Hello everyone, welcome to episode 34 of Conversing on Africa's Peace, a podcast focused on the African Union's Peace and Security Council and key related issues, produced by Amani Africa Media and Research Services. In this episode, we'll explore the agenda of the Peace and Security Council and activities which is to conduct in September 2025, while also reviewing the core takeaways from August's sessions. I am Previn Habu, joined today by my colleague Tefset Hailu, better known as Tefi. Hello, Tefi.
Hi, Previn.
Hi. So today we're diving into the program of work for Peace and Security Council for September 2025, with Angola taking the helm of the chairship. The Peace and Security Council has lined up 6 substantive sessions alongside the commemorations and high-level engagements, including the 80th UN General Assembly. However, before we walk through the agenda, let's rewind a bit and briefly reflect on the Peace and Security Council's engagement during the previous month on August, and highlight some of the key developments and notable adjustments made to the agenda over the month. Looking back, Tefi, let's dive into the PSC sessions in August 2025. How was the month?
August was a busy month for the PSC. Let's start with the session that considered the situation in Sudan, which was the first session of the month. During the session, the Council expressed grave concern over the worsening conflict, humanitarian crisis, and the siege of El Fasher, urging the Rapid Support Forces to lift restrictions and allow urgent aid delivery. The Council also reiterated its strong condemnation and rejection of the establishment of the so-called parallel government by the Sudan Founding Alliance, which is also called TASIS, led by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces.
If I'm not mistaken, Tefi, this echoed the Council's session, which was held in 11th March and 29th July, in which they released a press statements, and in which they strongly condemned and explicitly rejected the RSF declaration, warning of the risks of Sudan's fragmentation. So this is not something new, right?
Exactly. The past 2 PSC sessions in March and July specifically addressed RSF's announcement of the parallel government. Besides reiterating its strong condemnation and rejection of the establishment of the so-called parallel government, the Council also underscored the importance of an inclusive political transition, noting progress with appointment of a civilian prime minister and formation of a transitional government, reiterating that there can be no military solution to the conflict in Sudan. And the Council also called on the international community to provide support.
Okay, Tefi. In our analysis of the February session on Sudan, we highlighted that the Council merely reiterated its condemnation of all forms of external interferences. Was there a different outcome this time?
Yes, at this time, the PCRD reaffirmed its strong condemnation of external interference in Sudan, citing violations of PCC communiques and the UN Security Council Resolution 2750. And then the Council urged its sanctions subcommittee with CISSA and AFRIPOL to identify responsible actors and recommend measures. Also, interestingly, the PSC noted with concern the fragmented peace initiatives on Sudan and urged the AU Commission chairperson to convene all actors to merge efforts into a single AU and IGAD-led process, avoiding duplication and reinforcing the AU central role in pursuing an inclusive, lasting solution.
Yeah, that is very important. Avoid duplication and fragmentation and stay coordinated. But did the Council make any tangible next steps that could resolve its concerns?
Yes, we can't for sure guarantee it, but there are next steps that are provided in the communique. One is the PSC directed the AU Commission to organize a PSC field visit to Sudan to follow up on the transition. And the second one is the PSC called for the reopening of the AU Liaison office in Port Sudan.
Mm-hmm. So I guess this field mission will either be in Khartoum or Port Sudan.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tefi, for the highlights of the session on Sudan. Moving on, the 1295th session, which focused on the consultation of the Peace and Security Council with the African Governance Architecture and African Peace and Security Architecture, the APSA AGA platform, and the PRC Human Rights Democracy and Governance Subcommittee, in which in the session the PSC stressed the need for better alignment between the African Governance Architecture and the African Peace and Security Architecture, stressing alignment of objectives and coordinated implementation through the forthcoming joint roadmap.
Yes, that session, interestingly, it highlighted the urgency of a unified AU response to rising geopolitical threats such as mercenary activity, external interference, and illegal resource exploitation, framing this as a direct challenge to African sovereignty. I think this is significant because it signals a proactive continental coordinated approach to the increasingly complex security threats while asserting African agency and sovereignty. But of course, it requires concrete actions.
Absolutely. But was there anything significant in terms of implementing joint commitments and exploring innovative ways to enhance collaboration and promoting the shared values?
My response for that would be partially yes, there was, but the formulations in the communique are vague, making practical implementations challenging. If you have seen the communique, the PC called on member states to ratify and implement the African Charter on Democracy, Election and Governance, while emphasizing the integration of governance and human rights indicators into early warning systems to strengthen preventive actions. But it didn't mention or it didn't call out the violations of this convention during the meeting. It just stated that there is a need to ratify the document. It also urged the operationalization of the African Governance Facility to support democratic consolidation alongside a review of AU legal frameworks to ensure they remain fit for purpose. By condemning recent dialogues, such as the 13th high-level dialogue on governance and the upcoming ASWAN forum, the Council reaffirmed the importance of inclusive, people-centered governance anchored on youth, women, and civil society participation as a cornerstone for linking democracy, peace, and development.
Okay. I see that the other session was focused on education as well. This is education in conflict situations, and in the first two paragraphs of its outcome document, a communique, it expressed concern over the impacts of armed conflict on education and emphasized a strong commitment to protecting and advancing inclusive education, including in conflict situations. But what specific situations did the Council address?
Yeah, during the session, the Council condemned the attacks on education infrastructure and urged member states to enforce international humanitarian and human rights law, including criminalizing military use of schools. It also reaffirmed support for the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, prioritizing education in conflict and post-conflict contexts, and it encouraged innovative financing, scaling up domestic budgets, and emergency preparedness. Additionally, in the communique, you also see a prominent focus on integrating peace building, psychosocial support, and gender-sensitive education alongside community involvement and capacity building for member states in implementing protective declarations.
But Tefi, was there anything in the communique outlining the way forward?
Yes, Previn. Actually, the Council gave various tasks to the AU Commission with regards to the policy side. But not only the policy side, in terms of resource mobilization, also following up with the implementation of policies. The Council made some requests to the AU Commission, and these requests are to develop policies protecting education during conflicts, also to issue regular scorecards tracking harmful practices like child marriage, and mobilize resources for related AU mechanisms supporting education delivery in conflict zones. The Council also asked the Commission to create a comprehensive matrix of AU legal frameworks and an action plan for inclusive education continuity. An inclusive education continuity, provide technical support for implementing key declarations and conventions on school safety and child protection, and to also follow up on recommendations addressing education challenges in refugee camps.
A lot of action points there and commitments. I hope all of them will materialize. Anyway, let's proceed to the next session, to one of the next sessions, which was a briefing of the African members of the United Nations Security Council, the A3+, to the Peace and Security Council. Tefi, what is your reflection on the engagement of the A3+ and the PSC? Yeah, I believe that they adopted the communique after the session.
Yes, a communique was adopted, and in the communique, the PCC rightly emphasized the need for timely guidance and support to the A3, including better information sharing, joint missions, and institutionalized consultations. This focus on timely support directly drives PCC actions to enhance coordination and regular engagement with the A3 through structured consultations and improved information sharing. As such, the PCC decided to strengthen the coordination between the PCC and the A3 through timely and regular consultations, including quarterly briefings and monthly consultations between the PCC Trokia and the A3. The PCC also directed the AU Commission to ensure prompt transmission of PCC decisions and communicates to the A3 to inform their engagement at the UN, and to develop regular reports on activities supporting African positions within the UN Security Council. It emphasized institutionalizing annual consultative meetings between the PCC and the A3 at the ambassadorial level, and requested greater coherence between AU and the UN Security Council decisions on African issues. And lastly, the AU Commission is also tasked with enhancing cooperation between the PCC Committee of Experts and the A3 experts. This is to facilitate support to both and ensuring synchronization of UN Security Council and the PCC work programs.
Yeah, it's very important to have a coordination of synergies between the two bodies. So before wrapping up, let's touch on the 1297 session outcomes. The PSC considered different agenda items at the session. Tefi, right?
Oh, yes. During its 1297 session, the PCC considered 3 agenda items. The Council considered the terms of reference of the PCC Subcommittee on Post-Conflict Reconstruction and Development and the PCC Subcommittee on Counterterrorism. But in addition to the terms of reference for the 2 subcommittees, the Council also considered the field mission report of South Sudan.
Yeah, okay. So what were the major outcomes of the session?
During the session, the PCC adopted the terms of reference of the 2 subcommittees that I mentioned earlier, the Subcommittee on Post-Conflict Reconstruction and Development and the Subcommittee on Counterterrorism. And in addition to adopting this instruments, the PCC also called for their immediate operationalization in line with Assembly and PCC decisions. And in addition to the terms of reference of the two subcommittee, as I mentioned earlier, the report for the field mission to South Sudan was also adopted. Following the adoption of the report of the field mission, the PC directed the AU Commission to send a technical assessment team to South Sudan to identify key needs for reforms, elections, and also for disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. And in addition to that, to also recommend measures for addressing the country's challenges with a timeline to complete the transition by February 2027 and report back to the Council. In addition to these decisions, the Council also requested the AU Commission chairperson to urgently appoint a high-level representative. And in the communique, the PCC mentioned that it's preferred if that high-level representative could be a former head of state to engage South Sudanese authorities and stakeholders in support of concluding the transition.
Thanks for that reflection, Tefi. So looking ahead, as I mentioned earlier, the PSC Provisional Program of Work for the month of September envisions 6 substantive sessions. And first up, on September 3rd, the PSC kicks off with a briefing on a briefing to the Permanent Representative Committee, that's the PRC, on its activities conducted from June to August 2025. As Angola also plays the role of chairing the PRC, this briefing to the PRC will be delivered by Ambassador Innocent Shio, who is the permanent representative of Tanzania to the AU, and who was the PSC chair for June. Then Ambassador Rebecca Amuge Otengo of Uganda, who was the PSC chair for July. And finally, Ambassador Dr. Mohamed Khaled of Algeria, who was the PSC chair for August. Tefi, why is this kind of reflection important to the Council?
I think it's a vital moment for accountability, Previn. These briefings allow the PCC to take stock of its recent work, assess progress, and set the tone for the months ahead. We can establish that during those 3 months of being focused on, it's evident that the ongoing humanitarian crisis and devastating conflict in Sudan are a high priority concern for the AU, which actively seeks to mediate peace, support dialogue, and lasting peace. Foremost among these imperatives is escalating humanitarian catastrophe and protracted conflict in Sudan, which continues to demand our highest attention.
Absolutely. And equally enduring is the situation in South Sudan, a cornerstone of AU's peace architecture that merits its sustained engagement. The revitalized agreement on the resolution of conflict in South Sudan, RACS, it remains the bedrock of stability, yet it faces severe setbacks amid escalating violence, political tensions, and stalled implementation.
Yeah. Also, in the Horn of Africa, the AU Support and Stabilization Mission in Somalia exemplifies AU's operational resolve against transnational threats like Al-Shabaab, but it's currently grappling with acute financial vulnerabilities. Despite the mission's activation on 1 January 2025 and the realignment of the 12,626 personnel by June, a substantial funding shortfall persists, compounded by the UN Security Council failure to authorize the hybrid application of Resolution 2719. And this gap, driven by divergent views on assessed contributions covering up to 75% of costs, underscores the imperative for alternative mechanisms.
Well said, Tefi. Now, moving on to 4th of September, Council will have an open session to commemorate the African Amnesty Month. This is all about encouraging the voluntary surrender of illicit small arms and light weapons. Tefi, can you unpack the significance of this initiative?
Sure, I can. The African Amnesty Month is rooted in the African Union's goal for silencing the guns by 2030. It's about creating safe spaces for civilians to hand over illegal weapons without fear of prosecution. This builds on last year's event held in the Central African Republic, where the focus was on raising awareness and fostering community trust in disarmament processes. It's a practical step towards reducing violence and insecurity across the continent.
Absolutely. And it's encouraging to see the AU pushing for grassroots solutions to such pervasive issues. Now, let's shift to 17th of September, when the PSC will hold an ambassadorial level session on the nexus between climate change, peace and security in Africa. This comes right after the second Africa Climate Summit, which was held in Addis Ababa. And Tefi, what is at stake here?
As this session is critical, it's critical because climate change has been termed as a threat multiplier, seen from resource scarcity to displacement. In March 2025, the PSC convened its 1263rd meeting, which emphasized the need for sustainable financing to address adaptation, loss and damage, and climate security actions. This session will likely update us on the common African position on climate change, peace and security, incorporating inputs from AU member states and regional bodies. It's about ensuring Africa's voice is heard globally, especially ahead of the upcoming COP30.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder of how interconnected these issues are. Anyway, moving on September 19th, the PSC turns its attention to the Central African Republic, where local and presidential elections are set for December 2025. And there's a lot to unpack here, especially with the 2023 Constitution referendum, which extended presidential terms. You see, Tefi, what's the context?
The situation in CAR, it remains fragile. What's on the ground. The referendum, which extended presidential terms, as you mentioned, it extended the presidential terms for 7 years, and it removed term limits. And because of this, it has raised concerns about electoral transparency. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in the country is that humanitarian needs are dire, with 38% of the population is extremely vulnerable, according to UN OCHA. Add to that ongoing clashes, attacks on civilians, and the influx of refugees from Sudan and Chad. And because of that, we have got a complex crisis in the country. The Peace and Security Council is also expected to address the alarming use of child soldiers, as highlighted by Aman Africa's recent analysis.
It's just heartbreaking, especially the issue of child recruitment. Anyway, moving on to the 21st of September, the PSC will commemorate the International Day of Peace under the Angola's leadership, and under the theme "Act Now for a Peaceful World." And this commemoration builds up on the Pan-African Biennial, which was first held in Rwanda in 2019. And it's a moment to celebrate Africa's cultural diversity and resilience while reinforcing strategic partnerships for sustainable peace. Angola's leadership here is fitting given its role as both the PSC and AU chair, and it's a chance to highlight best practices in conflict prevention and resolution. And speaking of leadership, on the 24th of September, Angola will convene a summit-level meeting in New York during the UN General Assembly, themed re-energizing conflict prevention and resolution in Africa.
Oh, this sounds like a high-stake discussion.
It is, Defi. So this session brings together heads of states and government to reflect on the African Union's conflict prevention and resolution efforts. Key issues are expected to include strengthening the African peace and security architecture and the African governance architecture, fostering synergy with regional and international bodies like the UN Security Council, and ensuring African Union's peace agreements are implemented. The focus on neighboring countries' roles in supporting conflict-affected states is also critical.
All right. And finally, the provisional program of work envisages that on September 30, Council will hold a ministerial level session on the Sahel region, which is facing escalating violence and humanitarian challenges.
What should we expect here?
In terms of expectation, the Sahel is in a dire state with groups like Jenim and the Islamic State's Sahel province intensifying attacks. This session is therefore expected to provide updates on security, political, and humanitarian developments. It's an opportunity for the Peace and Security Council to strategize on stabilizing the region, addressing not just violence, but also environmental and political challenges.
Absolutely. And beyond these sessions, the Peace and Security Council subsidiary bodies are too busy too. The Committee of Experts will meet on September 10th to prepare for the summit. And there's a joint consultation with the UN Security Council on September 15th. Plus, the Military Staff Committee will tackle the proliferation of small arms and terrorism on the September 29th. Well, that's all we have time for today, which brings us to the end of another episode. We wish Angola a very fruitful month as it takes the chairship of the Peace and Security Council for September 2025. And we wish everybody taking part in the work of the Peace and Security Council productive discussions on the important topics outlined briefly here today. We are happy to encourage our listeners to dig deeper into the Peace and Security Council's agenda, as well as the analytical work that we produce here at Amani Africa. Before we go, as usual, we'd like to wish the following African states happy National Days of celebration in September. We have Eswatini on 6th of September, Guinea-Bissau on 10th of September, Mali on 22nd of September, and Botswana on 30th of September. Let me also thank our listeners for joining us for this month's edition of Conversing on Africa's Peace podcast. We hope you have a great month. We'll be back next month to consider the Peace and Security Council's agenda for October 2025. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged.